This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Wow, well, good evening. Let's try that again. Good evening.
I know.
Good
Really?
evening. Better. How often do we get an opportunity to get together and discuss, I think, a very important topic, such as the one we're talking tonight, and with some wonderful women, I think, to address. And for me, this is really an honor to be up here to moderate this panel tonight, because I did go through sort of a personal experience and breakdown several years ago, a couple of years ago, actually. And so I think this is a very, very important topic and a very important forum to be able to begin to have these types of discussions. Because as we all know, I'm sure in this room, that this concept of Superwoman, sometimes when we wear so many different hats, and I think that was one of the lessons that I've learned, when those hats are stripped away, oftentimes we have to look ourselves in the mirror and be able to realize who we are. And really what's important. So as Isabel mentioned, what we want to do tonight, I'm going to kind of pose some of the questions to each of our panelists up here tonight. So we're going to hold most of the questions for the end. However, we're going to kind of shift a little bit in between. We'll have some themes. We're going to start off talking about a little bit about language, and in between, some of the language that we're using, I should say. And in between, I may pause for a moment and just solicit a couple of questions. So we'll take one or two, and then we'll move forward. So does that sound okay with everyone? Okay. So let's get started, because I'm sure we're all eager to hear from everyone here on the stage. So let's just talk about, again, when we think about the language, and this whole, we hear and read about in magazines, et cetera, work-life balance, work-life balance. How many of you have heard or read something work-life balance? I have too. Okay. So let's just talk about this concept, this language of work-life balance. So I'm going to start with you, Deb. And just, what do you think about this terminology? Is it a realistic, sort of achievable in today's society? Are women, and men for that matter, really setting ourselves up, is it a realistic expectation? Is the language correct when we talk about work-life balance?
So I have found, and psychologists tell us, that there's so many things in life we can't change. It's how we mentally frame something. I work in cancer, and it's amazing how the frame from patient to survivor changes perceptions. And I think language is really important. So as a type A, trying to be an overachiever, I always felt that I was missing some zen in the word balance, that other women could find balance, and I was underachieving and could not be balanced. So if I could do well in other areas, why can't I too find work-life balance? And I finally, I think with age, came to the realization that I think the language is wrong. I think it's a myth. I don't think there's any such thing as a work-life balance. And I think it harms us to think that there is this a goal that we will never reach. So in reframing that, what I think there really is a change of priorities. And different things take different priorities in your life at different times. And accepting that when you say something is a priority, that then something must not be a priority. And then saying that it's okay for that not to be a priority right now is balance. And that's as balanced as I think, at least I would ever get. But helping me reframe and not think that there is this ultimate goal that other people have achieved or can achieve that I can't has helped me tremendously.
And I think you make a very good point, because I think this concept of trying to achieve something that may not necessarily be realistic, Winifred, what about you? What is your perspective on this?
Right, so I have dealt with the same dilemma as well as far as this balance. What is this? Is it achievable? Is it attainable? But I think it comes down to our individual definitions. Of course, what's achievable to me may not be achievable to someone else, but how does that really look in my world? So really taking that personal assessment of success in the work sphere as well as the home sphere. But I think about it like a synergy. You know, how can those two spheres work together? So am I successful in the workplace when I'm able to obtain my goals every day or every week? And then does that make me successful at home and vice versa? How does that really look? And it can evolve over time. It can look very different on Monday than it does on Friday. It's a constant assessment. It's a constant work in progress, if you will, in trying to be achieving that state of well-being, whatever that looks like for you, because I can define it for myself and it may look different amongst others. But I think it's really trying to set that goal for yourself and how those two spheres really can work hand in hand as much as possible. Leslie, what is your
So,
thoughts?
I don't know if I can add anything, except that I think we think that work and life is really on the same planes. And my play life, if you will, my life at home, cleaning the house, which isn't fun, but those kinds of things are very different than, being a boss and running a research institute.
Right.
And for me to even remotely think that there's a balance that I could put them on that same plane, I'm a little slow. It took me about 10 years to figure this out. But it isn't on the same plane. There are different needs that each one of my components of my life. And I need time, internal time, to make sure I understand the needs of each of my components of my life. And I need time alone to prioritize those. And every week it's different. Some weeks, work is the most important thing in my life. And don't tell anybody here from School of Medicine. There are some weeks and even months where my work is not the most important thing in my life. And it has to be that way, otherwise I'll have to sleep on the streets or maybe ask one of you for a room. But it is a constant reappraisal and balance and strategic priorities and the needs of not only myself and how I perceive it, but other people telling me what their needs are and how I can respond to them. And I think importantly, being fair to myself is extremely important part of this. Giving myself a break when I feel very stressed out to say, okay, you didn't do that really well. This week was really a screw-up week. I just, did all the things wrong. I was late for dinner. You know that weeks. And just say, it is what it is. And give yourself a break.
Right. So where do you all think this language of balance comes from and as work life? Because again, that's what we read about and that's what we hear about. But I think as you alluded to, Deb, and I know I'm not a big believer and I've always felt too that trying to live up to this expectation of, I've got to be in balance, I've got to have everything, and that sort of, in a way, sort of a self-defeating. But why do you think, or where do you think, particularly among women, that there's this constant focus to achieve work-life balance? We'll start with you, Deb.
I think we're our own worst enemy. I think we do it to ourselves. I'm sure that the people that are trying in books and in the media to tell us about work-life balance are not saying there's this unachievable goal that you should be after, but it's our interpretation of it. Although some of them seem to go overboard, like of all the things that you should do, and you think about all the things I should do to be balanced, yet how do I get to the dentist and take my kids to the doctor and spend 5 minutes with my poor partner, and who always ends up last on the list of kids and work. So, I think the language comes from us, but then I think we reinforce it among each other. And we are social creatures, women, and so I think it's the talk we talk among ourselves. And I don't know two women that don't get together and have 5 opinions on work-life balance or multiple conversations on the topic. So I think it's this reframing that we started with. I think it's how we frame the discussion in our own minds and with each other.
I agree also with Deb. I also think that societal norms play a huge part. What we see in the media, what we have grown up with, as far as history, as far as how women worked or didn't work outside the home, how they raised their children, how they're supposed to be beautiful at doing all of it at the same time. So I think societal norms play a huge part in defining this balance for us, and then we played into it, we bought into it, we continue to embrace it. Some of us are fighting it every single day, but I think that's where it's come into play a lot, where societal norms have followed us generation after generation, and we continue to live that out. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Leslie, what do
So
you
I think that we're socialized that way. I agree with Winnie.
Right.
We're socialized to say, you know, and we hear it all the time in language amongst, oh, you know, she graduated from, you know, college, now she's getting her master's degree, she's doing very well, she has this, she has that. And, you know, it's like this checklist. And, you know, we feel, you know, good about ourselves. And women, I think, a lot of times get that feeling about themselves externally. From a lot of that feedback, and the more kind of little check marks we have, oh, you know, she's got her PhD, now, oh, she made full professor, she did this, she did that, you know, she's got the perfect house, look at that, you know, her garden looks good, and I'm a big gardener. It's very important in my life, my gardening, extremely important. My flowers look great today, so, by the way. But, you know, I think that we just get this. I mean, think about all the TV programs. Winnie's too young for this, but all the TV programs, you know, Leave It to Beaver, this woman, she had perfect hair, she dressed, never wrinkled, and I look at myself at 7 a.m. and go, oh my God, you know.
That's true.
I think we're socialized for perfection and for excellence, and when we don't get that, we don't feel as good about ourselves, and I think that's a huge mistake we do, not just for you know, women in general, but for ourselves, you know, and giving ourselves a break.
And I guess along those lines, this concept of doing it all and having it all. What are you all's thoughts about that language? Because again, I think there's this, particularly women that are high achievers. We feel this need that, you know, success is I gotta have it all, or doing it all. Is that really, in addition to this work life, you know, when we talk about socialization and social norms, is it really possible to have it all and do it all? What do you think? We'll start with you, Leslie.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having goals and saying, okay, I'm here, I finished my undergraduate degree, I want a master's degree, I want to have a good job, I want to have a job that allows me balance with my children, whatever the goal is. But I think it's important to have realistic goals and to realize that throughout your lifespan that those goals are going to change. And you're going to get to a point where you just can't, it's not a checklist, it's not adding on one more achievement. And then along the pathway of doing it all and having it all comes failure. And if we are so totally focused, and maybe I'm the only one in the room, I have failed miserably. Several things, and you know, I think understanding that so much focus on achievement doesn't understand us to understand failure and what we can learn from that and how we can move beyond. So I think having it all is, some of it's okay, some of it not. What do you think?
And I think it comes down to individually defining what it means to have it all. For me, it's having, you know, the family life, which is more important than the work life. Not that it doesn't pay the bills, not that it doesn't allow us to do other things. At the same time, if that falters for me, then that would not be successful. Other folks might feel that their work is more important than their family. And like Leslie had said earlier, that there's ebb and flows to that. You know, 1 week work takes priority, and another week children take priority, family and all of that takes priority. But I think having it all is just an individual definition, because some folks may look at me and say, oh, you have a family, you have, you know, these goals that you've set for yourself, you've achieved them, but there are a lot of things that I still want to do. So I really don't think I have it all yet either. I'm a work in progress. I think we all are, and we're all still trying to achieve and really set those attainable goals as much as possible. And if we don't reach them, we have a plan B. There's a plan C, and just being flexible with that. And measuring success is not linear. You can take a zigzag approach and still be successful, but don't let anyone define that for you. You have to really own that and define it for yourself. I think we put each other in boxes thinking that this person is successful because they went A through Z, when you know, you might do A, D, come back to B, and then end up at P, and you're still successful. So it's all in how you define what is having it all.
I think I was, I know a lot of women that are less concerned about having it all. What they're concerned about is doing it all, because somehow there's tremendous guilt if you don't
Right.
do it all. And I certainly have been affected by that. You know, I think finally a therapist said you have to stop dusting the doornail knobs, Deb, okay, and straighten in the tissue boxes, just like give something up. So,
Wouldn't go.
but mom will see it, but my mom will see it, okay? So, I think as goals are great. Somehow I've meandered through life without concrete goals. I've been tremendously fortunate in getting where I have without having as many goals because I've been so focused on doing. In fact, I remember someone, not me this time, that went to a therapist and they said, "You've been a human doing and not a human being." And I thought, every woman that I know could use that line. And it was a man that they said it to. And I thought, no.
Right.
No, I don't think so. So I think that we have to look at what we're I think it's all, again, framing. Are we talking about having it all? Are we talking about doing it all and feeling guilty if we don't do it all? And that someone,
Right.
I don't know, do we grow up with this, that they're going to judge us? Was it the pearls and when she was doing the sweeper, you know?
I think so, was it.
Or I love what they used to say about Ginger Rogers. You know, she did everything Fred Astaire did backwards and in heels. And I don't know, maybe we just grow up with that
Yeah.
somehow ideal of that's what we're supposed to be doing too.
And I think it's interesting too, because I think the point of defining what all is. I went to a conference in Lima a couple of months ago, and that was a topic of discussion, that everybody's all is going to be different, and success is going to be different. And I think someone once told me as well is that you possibly can have it all or do it all, just not necessarily all at once. That it may be over the span of a lifetime. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. And moving beyond the guilt of that. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about this language of work-life balance and having it all, doing it all, et cetera. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about support, because I think as women, again, oftentimes superwomen, you know, building our support structures and really getting an idea of what it is that we need, so that we maybe can do it all, maybe can have it all, and maybe not. So let's talk a little bit about negotiating our needs, and how do we do that? There is a new book out that some of you may have heard. By Sheryl Sandberg called Lean In, and she talks a little bit about this concept of negotiating our needs, particularly from our significant others. So we're going to talk a little bit about not only our significant others, but also other individuals like our healthcare professionals as well. So let's start with you, Deb, and talk about how do we do this? How do we as women negotiate the things that we need?
So if you look at Lean In on Amazon, another book comes up by Lauren Babcock, which is a little bit older but very good. It's called Women Don't Ask, and it's about the gender differences in what women negotiate and do not negotiate. And there was a term in there that I really like. It's called, and now I forget it. But what it means is it's cumulative disadvantage. And when we don't negotiate, we accumulate. That's right. It's accumulation of disadvantage. When we do not negotiate from the start, we accumulate. We start the seeds of accumulated disadvantage. Now, whether that is in salary, it turns out that 7% of women will try to negotiate their salary versus 57% of men. And when we don't negotiate just from the very beginning, we accumulate the disadvantage of a lower salary. It turns out that if you put in the same resume with the same qualifications, but put in 2 different salaries, the person that's looking at you, your job application, thinks you're worth more because you have a higher salary. So you've got same qualifications. So the impact of this is monumental. There's also data that shows if we negotiated our salaries from the start, women are likely to accumulate $1 million more by retirement than women who don't negotiate.
Right.
Now, an accumulated disadvantage isn't everything. It's in our house chores. So when we first, are married or have a partner, I find that women tend to want to do it all and be a good partner in the beginning, and so they take on a lot of things, which really quickly we regret. Really. And then we moan and groan that our partner isn't doing it.
Right.
But now it's too late because we are into it by years, and we are changing the playing field. I mean, we are false marketing ourselves when we do that, unless we negotiate from the beginning. And then cumulatively, what we take on or what we do, where it's just easier than to argue, is because we did not have the negotiation skills, savvy, whatever, even thought to do it from the beginning, and we accumulate disadvantage in our household. We accumulate disadvantage with our kids in not even negotiating with them about the chores they should be doing. So now we're taking on our work, our kids, our partners' work, and of course partners never do it as well too as we would do it because we're women and we anyway. So I think, but Mom never took us aside. My mother didn't take me aside and say, this is how we should negotiate. And one of the things that I find about the data is younger women in some of these surveys say, this is a problem of the older generation. This is not our problem. Well, guess what? The surveys show that it is what younger women's problems. In fact, some of them were less likely to negotiate. At least with age, some of them just say, the hell with it, we're going to negotiate, right? But the younger women, Mom is still not taking you aside and teaching you the skills you need to negotiate. So again, I think that this is us helping each other, using the right language and working together with our friends, our children, our partners, and trying to learn the skills to do this.
Right.
I'm curious, before we move, how many of you in the audience right now feel like you are a good negotiator, whether it be on your work or your home life? Okay.
Wow.
Good.
Right, but only a few. Right. Because that's a little
I think
small.
it's a third.
A little bit more.
Right. So, in piggybacking on what Deb had mentioned as far as social support, social networks, it's definitely important to establish that communication with the folks that you're in touch with. And you can do that, of course, at work and on the home realm as well. And there's a book that I'm reading now called Network, and it's by Patty Anklam, A-N-K-L-A-M. It's really great, and it's talking about not only the networks that we create and establish and maintain personally, but it's talking about taking them globally, of course, through social media and things of that sort, but how much time you have to invest in it because you have to build that trust over time to be able to ask for that support from those folks. But it really tells you how to do it strategically and to continue that relationship, if you will, whether it's virtual or it's in person. But I think definitely identifying those folks that you can trust, that are in your social network or that can provide that social support, and really asking for help and really being concrete about it. I need help with a meal preparation for one day out of the week. I need help with childcare, or I need help with talking with my spouse. I need time to do that. So in order to have time, I've got to schedule it, but I need to ask someone to be there to watch my kids, or whatever that may be. So really being diligent and vigilant in having our voices heard, and however that looks. So whether it's continual conversations about it instead of beating someone over the head after years of being frustrated, but really start those conversations a lot earlier. And my mom did tell me, and several women in my family before I got married, don't do something you can't keep up. And that resonated throughout my entire marriage, and it'll be 19 years next week. And the fact that I necessarily didn't like to cook. I cooked just to survive, and I've learned over time how to cook better. But he is the primary preparer, which is great. But at the same time, that shouldn't have been something that he's expecting, hopefully. I'm sure in the back of his mind it could be. But that was just one thing that I didn't necessarily promise or start out doing and then stop. But I think we all get caught up in that. We want it to, look nice. We're going to make things work. And before we know it, we're down 5-10 years. And it's like, oh my God, I really don't want to do that anymore. Or how do I really switch gears? And things happen in life where you have to switch gears. You have children, you have work schedules, and you have to constantly negotiate with one another. How do we make this home life work? Or how do we make it work at work with other colleagues? We have to constantly negotiate what our needs are in order to be successful. And hopefully, if you can continue that conversation, you will be successful in that. Some people don't want to hear it. You're talking to, someone that has a blank stare, but over time, you continually have to have that conversation and really address those folks in a way that they are listening and that you have your needs met.
And Leslie, what about one of the things I think it would be important from the perspective of, we've talked a little bit about home life, from a healthcare perspective, because oftentimes as women, if we may go to a doctor, for example, and may not feel, maybe our needs aren't getting met in that realm, and again, negotiating our needs in that setting as well.
Yeah, I think a core element of negotiation is communication. And whether it's negotiation or renegotiation, it's there has to be a transparency of communication of your needs and the other person's needs, and a willingness to try to meet somewhere away from where you are. Like maybe I will try to cook, if you can see. I am a horrible cook. I cut myself really bad the other night. So I try to cook a couple times a week. So feel sorry for the people in my household. I can make the dogs food, and that's about it. But from a healthcare point of view, I was just recently finished a kind of a stint with Women's Day magazine, and my approach to it was that women need to be empowered by their healthcare. So often, in medicine, we have patients that just take what is given to them, and it's your body, it's your health, it's your life, it's the only one we have. If you're not happy within a relationship with a physician or provider, whoever, then I didn't mean to say something that was oh my God.
Wow.
That was Emory Healthcare. Sorry. So, anyway, but I really feel very strongly, and I don't want to get up on a soapbox about this, but encourage everybody here, if you all could encourage all your friends, find a physician, a group practice that you really can truly engage in. I tried to put it all in nurse practitioners. Absolutely, no question. Any kind of clinician, I put clinician as a broad statement of physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, et cetera. Find people that are going to have dialogue with you, not somebody who comes into the room for 60 seconds. Increasingly, it is your health. You need to take responsibility. The older you get, the more needs you have. And you see it's so fundamentally important for you to have somebody you feel comfortable with, somebody who can talk to you about any issues that you have. And if that's not that person, and encourage all your friends. Please don't sit there and take it. Don't give them the copays. Go in and find somebody. There are a lot of very good nurse practitioners, a lot of great PAs, a lot of great physicians in Emory Healthcare, as well as in other hospitals. We're very lucky in the city of Atlanta. I go to a lot of great physicians, but I've stopped going to some as well. And it's just a pet peeve of mine that we can't take control of our lives. And people get busy, but I think it's okay to stop the physician and say, hey, I have a few questions for you before you go. I have some concerns about this. I'm gaining a little weight or whatever it is as you get into your 50s. And I think it's really important, for us to be empowered and not just to show up for those mammograms, not to show up for those annual, but have active discussions about personalizing and optimizing your own health. So.
The other sort of kind of segue, I think, from this negotiating our needs, and we talked a little bit about language and doing it all, et cetera, is this concept of no and what that really means, and why some women, and we and I know I'm guilty, have challenges with saying no. Just by quick survey, how many of you in the audience feel like you have a challenge with saying no?
Can we all raise our hands?
Okay. So the question is to the panel, why? And how can we become more effective at saying no? And I think before we hop to that, how many of you that raised your hands probably would like to say no? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. Again, in negotiating our needs and becoming more empowered, whether it be at home, whether it be in the healthcare setting, to really begin to, if we need to negotiate, remove some things, how do we do that? So let's start with you.
I'm not a good example. Actually, I struggle with this. I do better at some periods, and then I slip back. It's something that I need to constantly work on. But I think it's that same thing about doing it all. And once you start doing, and people know you're a doer, they ask you to do more.
Yeah. Right.
And somehow that's a compliment to us.
Right.
I think. I mean, it must give, somewhere deep down, it must be positive feedback, right? Because we keep then saying yes.
Yeah.
And that people rely on us. And if they ask and we do it, and we're the go-to person, we get it done.
And you do it well.
And we do it well. And we are rewarded by tons more, No good deed goes unpunished when we do this. So I think it's actually a matter of limit setting. And I had to reframe this too, which is my favorite new thing now, is it's reframing and trying just to get a better handle on it. So the problem with not saying no is then it is not possible to say yes to all the things that we should be saying yes to. Or we ignore some of the yeses, like our self-health care or our self-mind-body connection. Because we are not saying no to lots of other people and doing things for everyone else but us is what happens. So it's, we want to say yes because, in certain circumstances, but there's limits to that. And so we have to learn to say no. So I think I've gotten better at, when I do say yes, I say yes within a context or a limit. Or I set limits for myself. Whether it's something I'm asked to do at work, how many committees do you sit on? All right, I will sit on this, but then that's it for the year. So I've already framed the limit for myself. And I will say that out loud to others then. Whether it's something I do at home, it's okay, I will do this and this, but that's it, and I won't do any more. But I think when we don't say no, we're saying yes to everything. And I think that's probably the problem. It's not that we say yes too often or we don't say no enough. It's what is the context and the limits we set around it, and not just saying no, yes openly to everything all the time.
Right, true. What I've learned over time is that you can say no, but really have to say no and mean it. So I've often left the door open too many times when I've said, oh, no, but if you need help or if you still need someone to serve, I will. And I've learned over time, no, I have to say no and mean it and don't say anything else. And that's kind of tough. Just leave it, no, I'm sorry, or no. Don't even say you're sorry. No, I just cannot do this at this point in time. And that is a process to work through. So I've gotten better at it over the years, probably less at it at home, a little bit better at work to negotiate that. But at the same time, I think that's been a process and an important evolution, if you will, regarding saying no and meaning it, because before you know it, you get overwhelmed. And I really tell folks that if I can't give 100%, which you can't give 100% on everything, but if I can't give the majority of my time and effort to make this successful, whatever it is, whatever you're asking me to do, then I really can't take it on. And I know I can't take that on if I don't have enough time to think it through, to read over the document, whatever it is. And so I'm not able to serve at this time or fulfill that capacity. And so just really being honest and upfront. I can't do it. That doesn't mean I don't like you or love you. It's just, if I can't be at the top of my game and really help you be successful in whatever that is, then it can't happen at this point in time. So really saying no and meaning it.
So it's funny because I'm probably better at this at home than I am at work, where, I mean, as a university professor, you are on so many committees, and the more committees you're on, the more committees you're on, and my gosh, my goodness, they just throw them at you. Sometimes when you say yes, it leads to really good things. And that's kind of the challenge. And sometimes when you say no, you miss great opportunities. And so it's always a balance. So it's easy to say, I need to say more no, I need to say no more often. But it's not so straightforward, at least it's not for me. Sometimes it's, I get asked to go to Lima, Peru. Oh, then the next week somebody asks me to go to Buenos Aires, and I go, I'd rather go to Buenos Aires than Lima, Peru. I mean, those are trivial examples, but they do happen. Because I am going to Lima in a couple of months, and I'll have to hit you up for some restaurant things. And then I am going to Buenos Aires in August. But, and I'm going to Berlin in 2 weeks, and then Paris after that, all of which I have trouble saying no. No, but I think what happens, though, seriously, is that if you have a pathway that you want to embark on in your life, if you have things that you want to achieve, then by allowing these distractions to come in and meeting other people's needs. I like to be a team player. I went to college on athletic scholarship, and so I played team sports in high school and college. And so I like to be a team player. I like to help out my colleagues. I like to help out my university. But I have goals and ideas in my own personal life and home life. And by allowing a lot of these distractions to come in, I find I don't get to do what I want to do in life. And so that's the real challenge, is that how can I then say no and maintain where I want to go in life and be happy with my own achievements. Otherwise, I find, especially as women, I'm constantly on this conference call and this and doing this and picking this person up or giving them a ride and doing whatever, and I don't get my own needs or my own goals met. And so you can say yes, but as long as it allows you that sufficient internal feeling that you're doing everything you want in your own life to meet your goals and achievements, then saying yes is okay, especially when it has to do with a meeting in Paris. So.
I'd say yes to that too. But I think you bring out a very good point from this concept of, when is it appropriate to say yes versus no. And I think, which brings this to the next issue of guilt and the associated guilt oftentimes of saying no. And particularly, we've talked a little bit more so in the work context, but what about full-time mothers, for example, who, the full-time job is obviously being a mother. And in that context, obviously, the guilt of saying no to prioritize their time and how to do that, how to negotiate that. So let's talk a little bit about the guilt of potentially saying no, so that we can move towards really some of the things that are really meant for what we're supposed to be doing. So I'll start with you.
Okay. You reminded me of a book called The Third Shift, and there's a book called The Second Shift. But the third shift really talks about, the second shift talks about the 9 to 5, which is the first shift, and the second shift is when you get home. So that's another job that you're starting. Then the third shift book, and that one's it's authored by Michelle Cremon Bolton. And the third shift talks about the dynamics between the first job, the second job at home. And the third job is really negotiating, communicating, and then also really assessing our decisions and guilt associated with the quote-unquote balance between the first and the second shift. Did we make the right decisions? Should I have said yes more? Should I have said no more? Did I achieve my goals? You know, where am I on a daily, weekly, monthly, or annual basis in moving up the trajectory of success for myself? So I think there's guilt in a lot of decisions that we make, whether it's the sacrifice of not doing one thing over the other. But I think we have to just realize that I made the best decision at the time, where I am, whether it's for my family or whether it's for work, and realizing that whether it's considered a failure or not, it's just where I am at this place. And if you could see into the future, obviously you might do things differently. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a wrong or right or black and white. But do we kind of take a self-assessment all the time as far as it being negative about the decisions we make? Sure. I think that we have to take a more positive look, and we don't always do that. So that's why it's good to have those supports around us to say, you know what, that's okay. That's what you chose to do. You move forward the best you know how. And you make the decisions and you move forward and to be successful in that realm, whatever that is for you. And I keep coming back to whatever it is for you, because I can't define success for you, you can't define it for me, etc. But I think that having that constant conversation with yourself and that self-assessment, you'll be able to challenge that guilt, if that makes sense, to really not feel guilty anymore about it, to really say, okay, this is where I want to go to 4 trips within 4 months or 2 weeks, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. It's going to broaden your horizons. You get to have fun in the sun, and then you come back and you'll be even more lively for your children, perhaps, right? Perhaps, or maybe you want to stay a little while, right? Maybe. A little while longer. So I think it comes down to the decisions that we make. We make them at that appropriate time as best as we can, and we just can't continue to beat ourselves up about it. And that's really what it comes down to.
Any thoughts, Deb?
So for stay-at-home moms, we were talking about that too, right?
Yes.
So, in the period where I stayed home with my children and my friends that are stay-at-home moms, first of all, it is way harder than work. It just, but somehow because you're home, I think that some people, not all, but some people do deal with guilt like you're home. So the mind-body connection, why are we so worried about that because you're home? Well, when you're a stay-home mom, you are doing anything but looking after yourself. And I think then a lot of women are reluctant to ask for what they need because their partner is generally working if they're a stay-at-home mom. And then when their partner comes home, their partner was working all day. So then to say, could you take care of the kids because I need some alone time? Well, there's this guilt that you're home, you've been home. But no, that is not the truth of that. And I think that goes back to communication, negotiation, and those issues. I think being not guilty for asking for what we need is really important for a stay-at-home mom. I also think this back to saying no. The thing about saying yes too often is that we say yes because there is a positive feedback of the things, good opportunities, and we feel good about doing things for our family or our, whether it's our partner or our children or our neighbors or our parents. But at some point, it's self-defeating because then you're not doing a good job for any of those things you've said yes to because you've said yes to too many things. Even here with students, the hardest thing is to say, I can't take on another student. I cannot read one more paper. Because if I say yes to you, then I am letting down a whole line behind you that I've already said yes to. So there's terrible guilt about that in many ways, unless you are very conscious and have a very positive self-talk to yourself, which is a whole therapy now, positive psychology, which I think is phenomenal, by the way. Because I think that I think all people, males and females, have a lot of negative self-talk, which causes a lot of guilt. And I think any skills that we can learn to talk to ourselves more positively and get rid of that guilt are really beneficial.
I think I have a number of very good friends that are stay-at-home moms, and their jobs are much harder than mine. I can't even begin to cope with how they do it. I get to go to work and get away from things, and then the house doesn't magically clean itself But that's okay, and you learn to realize those things. But the stay-at-home moms is just incredible, the multitasking abilities that they're capable of. And I think there are a lot of perceptions that women in the workforce think that, oh, stay-at-home moms don't this. I just want you to know, for all of us, and I know most of you in the room, nobody thinks that. It's just an incredibly difficult task. But one of the things that I think has resonated through everybody's discussion is this feeling of fairness with yourself. I try to be fair with myself. I don't give myself a break when I know I can do better, because sometimes I'm like a sloth and don't do what I should be doing, whether it's going to the gym at 6:30 at night, even though I know I feel better. But sometimes it's just being fair to myself and giving myself a break and saying, okay, you didn't go to the gym. Tomorrow you don't have an excuse. And guess what? You didn't go to the gym today, and tomorrow's Friday, and you generally like to, take the dog for a walk, which I don't consider going to the gym. So then I have to play these little negotiations with myself in order that I feel that I'm still meeting my own needs and putting myself in a position to feel good about myself. And so I think being fair with myself, not just positive, because I think sometimes I have to be, all right, that's okay, you're going to get that break, but it wasn't your best venture. And just be fair about it and realize that at the end of the day, what do I want to do? I want to do things more positively than negatively. That doesn't mean it's going to be 100%. That means I want to be on the plus side. And I think at the end of a day, if I'm on the plus side, I think it's been a good day.
So I'm going to just pause for a moment. We've talked a little bit about language, the language that we're using. We've talked a little bit about support structure. So I want to just throw out to the audience if there's maybe one or two questions at this point before we move on.
We talked about language, we talked about guilt, and I feel guilty about the way I use this language.
Uh-oh.
But I'm going to throw it out there, and I want maybe you guys can talk about this tonight. The concept of work-life balance, that language that you started off with, to me is really challenging, because I think that my work is my life, and I think that my parenting and my house is work. And so I maintain balance by thinking those things, that I love to work, and that's part of my life, and my kids are not easy, and all the other things are also difficult. And so I wonder if that makes sense, or, and sometimes I feel guilty by saying my kids are work, but are they? Yeah.
I love somebody that says that out loud.
Right.
You mean they're not absolute perfect and have the best grades, and I think kids are work. I think that's wonderful that you would say that. The guilt, the problem isn't the balance, is that get rid of the guilt, right? You did choose to have the children, so you do have to put up with it. As many of us have learned after we've had them. We used to joke, never mind, about, is it too late for, no, but what you have. But, I think that's what we're talking about, where, what is good for me is not good for you. And it doesn't have to be.
Right.
I think that there are a lot of people and men, work is work that they love, right? And home is hard work for a lot of men. And they're really comfortable with that, and we're not. And we're free to be comfortable with that too. I think that's, and now that life has changed, that there are a lot of stay-at-home husbands. And after 33 years, my husband has retired from his job and has taken on a new career, but he's more at home now doing those things. And I love work. I mean, I'm like really happy for him to be doing that. So I think we're in this great place that we can have those options and feel good about that if we can get rid of the guilt about feeling with that.
Right. I think it's owning, whether it's owning your guilt or owning where you are in the space that you're in at this present moment. Because throughout life, raising young kids, very challenging. Then teenage years, very challenging. I have a 14 and an 8-year-old, so I'm at different realms right now. But so I feel what you're saying, and it is a challenge for sure. But there's some highs and some lows, of course. But I think owning it, I think we often put on this face that everything's wonderful. Our kids, like you said, are neat and clean. They're intelligent. They don't run around and act crazy. and makes us crazy sometimes, but then we also have to be great at work too, and doing it with a smile and looking beautiful, of course. So I think that undue pressure that we put on ourselves, we put on each other. I think we don't support each other often enough. What happens is we often prejudge about stay-at-home moms, and they may prejudge us, and vice versa. And so that really puts this kind of negative connotation on which one's right, which one's wrong, when it's neither one. It's a choice that you made at that particular time, and it can change. You know, most of us were at home for a period of time with our children, but we're not doing that at this point, and we didn't do it long term. But we have friends and family members that have done it for a period of time and very successful at that. And that's what brings them joy, and bringing others joy, maybe work or having a little bit of both. But I think owning it, when it comes down to it, and just owning where we are at that particular time. And you may have less guilt over time. You may have more guilt on this day and things of that sort. Yeah.
I think if you're I'm not speaking for, I absolutely don't know who I don't know you, but I think that you're a superwoman. That's why you're here. I saw that S on your chest. But I think that what happened, if you're a really goal-oriented, career-oriented person, we spend a lot of time, and I'm speaking for myself, I spend a lot of time honing my skills at work. And probably early on in my career, I didn't spend so much time honing my skills in my personal life. I felt like it should just flow. And then I realized my mom died, and all, it was where I just was totally overwhelmed. And then I realized that I have to work at everything. I have to work at my personal life in order for it to meet my needs. And then every different person you interact with is different, and especially when they, little kids, they're all a pain in the, whatever. But it's tough, and I think we get socialized as career people, 12 years of college, postdoc, this and that, and we hone our skills. But how much? I always say to myself, do I spend as much time honing my skills as being a friend, as being a partner, of everything else in my personal life, the way I do the 60 hours a week I put in at Emory? And the answer is no. And I have to realize then it is going to be at times. Thank God it isn't like that all the time. Otherwise I'd really go crazy. But at times it is going to be a lot of work. And I think just being fair to yourself and realizing that it's tough, especially with kids. They only multiply all the stress, and give yourself a break. Forget the guilt. Don't be guilty.
Mm-hmm. We're going to move on I'm sorry, go ahead.
Interesting that I don't relate to that, so I appreciate you saying that. But the one thing I'm thinking about is that we have to show by example to our children, our daughters, because like you said, our moms didn't pull us aside, and they had a different experience themselves. Yes. So, my mom looks at me and she's like, "Oh my God, how do you do this?" But it makes me realize how important it is for my daughter, what I show her in not being Superwoman.
And I think that's a very important point. What message are we sending the next generation of women? So we're going to move on to sort of switch gears again and talk about some myths, because I'm sure that we've all heard them, whether we've read them, talked to someone, etc. Now, we often hear about stress. I'm sure we hear that oftentimes stress is bad, but stress can actually be a good thing. And the important thing is distinguishing between good stress and bad stress. So, Deb, I'm going to ask you, just to start off by kind of giving us some sense of the differences between good stress and bad stress. And when can stress actually be good?
So I think it's just like the word balance. I think that it's a misnomer. We look for this goal, to this stress-free life. And there was actually just something out today in the press, came out this afternoon. There have been studies that showed, like everything in life, so there is good stress and there's bad stress. Short-term stress actually makes us, improves our cognition, our thinking. It actually stimulates cells in an area called the hippocampus and makes our memory better long-term. So it gives us a heightened awareness. Stress sometimes gives us goals. You know, to be perfectly satisfied and stress-free when we're laying on the beach, you know, and somebody's fanning us with palm fronds and feeding us grapes, you know, what motivation is that? Where are the goals there? So it's actually a little bit of stress, a little bit of things that we think are bad, like dissatisfaction, that makes us achieve and makes us feel good. So stress is not all bad. But now chronic stress then is bad, because then when your body's under stress, it makes hormones and chemicals that instead of increasing your memory, decrease your memory, and instead of increasing your cognitive functions, decrease your cognitive functions. So again, it's like this word balance. It's you know, some of it can be good, some of it can be bad, and it's just framing that there is no such thing as a stress-free life, nor should we seek it. It's not the human condition, and it actually is not beneficial to us. What it is that we don't want long-term chronic stress, and we want to recognize when when stress starts to get long-term, and then get help in some way.
And I think that you bring out a good point, this issue, particularly among superwomen, of how can women recognize when we're under chronic stress that's negatively impacting our health. And I can speak from personal experience when I say that I dismissed a lot of the symptoms. I studied things in textbooks, et cetera, and I knew what they were. But oh no, not me, not me. No, I'm not depressed. No, I'm crying all the time. I have headaches. All the physical manifestations were there, but not me. So I think from a perspective of how can women tune into recognizing this chronic stress from the standpoint, and then recognizing, you know what, this isn't stress, this isn't good stress, this is negatively impacting my health and my ability to function. And I'm going to start with you, Leslie, and particularly to this, not only the first question of how it impacts, how women can tune in, but then also how it impacts our health. And if you're able to just speak from a cardiovascular perspective in particular.
Yeah, stress is the biggest, for women, every woman in this room, stress is the strongest component that we can find out in terms of presenting symptoms. Stress-related symptoms are really a strong component of women who are having a heart attack or presenting with heart disease. And I think one of the key components, so understanding that there are strong sequelae that happen when you get stressed out. You're running here and there and you never have time. American Heart Association, I don't know if any of you have seen this commercial they have of this Superwoman. She should have a thing on her chest. And relatively young women, because we're seeing younger women coming in for having heart attacks and being diagnosed with coronary disease, heart disease. And this woman is feeding the kids, making lunch for this and that, and doing all this stuff, and she's sweating and very stressed out. And you know, there are a number of sequelae, things that happen adversely when you have chronic stress. You get your blood pressure goes up. You can feel it when you're stressed. You're running from here and there. You don't watch what you eat. Okay, so maybe I'm the only one who doesn't watch what we eat. And when I travel a lot, that's probably my biggest problem is I fly from here to there, and then I eat McDonald's French fries and something like that. I shouldn't say that. I work in cardiology, right? I'm not supposed to say that. I'm like Michelle Obama. That's my big problem, French fries. But, you know, we don't eat well. We don't exercise. So everything is just a spiraling, you know, out of control, not going in the right direction. And you get hypertensive, you get overweight, your lipids get out of control, and all of those are major risk factors. And that's a very common presentation we see for the roughly 10 million women who live in the United States with heart disease. In managing your stress is something we could talk about. I mean, Tanya probably could have a long discussion, and I've certainly been in positions where I've been way, way, way overstressed. And had just light bulb moments of, you know, when I was exercising going, you have got to manage this. And, you know, those illuminations shouldn't happen. You know, I'm putting myself in there. is being in touch with the amount of stress that I can manage. I agree with Deb is that, I know I do a lot of public speaking, mostly at scientific meetings, and I know if I'm totally relaxed, I'm going to really be bad. So, I'm just too relaxed. I need a little bit of enthusiasm, a little bit of passion, a little bit of anxiety about what I want to communicate. And so some of that is very important, and it revs us up to do the things we want to do. But beyond that, when it goes over day after day after day, not getting enough sleep, not eating right, and the whole kind of sequelae that ensue of that pattern that goes on year after year. And we see women at Emory Healthcare come in every day across all 7 facilities all the time because of chronic stress and presenting for evaluation of a suspected heart attack. And it is probably the number one thing that I think women don't do a good job. And I'll put myself on that category of constantly trying to say, how much can I manage? And when do I say no, that I can't manage? And it may be something I did last week perfectly fine, but not this week, not today. I can't do it.
Right.
I cannot do it. And communicating that. I can't take the dog out. I know it's just 10 minutes. I just can't. I need to sit.
Right.
I need 10 minutes by myself. It's just too much today. And you have to have that point where you say, I have to stop it, and I have to stop it now, so that tomorrow I can get up and start another day. And it's just...
And I think that's very important, particularly when it comes to, our physical health and our mental and emotional health as well. When we talk about negotiating and needs, that's a perfect example of when you feel yourself getting to that limit, saying, you know what, I need some time. And I think one of the things in tuning into ourselves is one of the things I'm beginning to do is keep a journal and kind of track how I'm doing, because then I can tell when some days are not so good and some days when I need to pull back. I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So what I want to do is I want to just ask the panel, starting tomorrow, if you were going to give one sort of pearl of wisdom or one practical strategy that the individuals in the audience could do tomorrow, what would that be?
I would schedule the time you need. So one of the best things I learned is that if I don't schedule activities for myself, that everybody else's activities will fill up, committees or work or whatever. So actually being very active in scheduling yoga or scheduling lunchtime with a friend. And things that I used to think somehow I would fit in or take for granted. So I think the best thing is I would tell you all, go home and look at your calendar and start in advance putting in time for you.
Right. I wrote down a few because it's not just one. I wish there were just one. But as far as the scheduling, really communicating about what's important to for your life and in your success, and however that looks. So really taking that personal assessment, sitting down. I think we don't do that enough. We take a personal assessment at work and how I'm going to be successful, but do we really take a personal assessment of how that looks at home or how that looks in the community and volunteering, whatever realm you want to really assess at that particular time. But what does that success look like in that realm? And then really finding those supports in those various areas. So we didn't talk about it, but also spirituality. So the aspect of really connecting to a higher power, to a transcendent, something that's greater than you. The reason why you're here, what is the connection? How do you find that peace? Is it through meditation? Is it through talking to others? Is it reaching out for clinical counseling, things of that sort? So really finding those supportive networks that's really going to help you in being successful. And then really prioritizing and scheduling that me time. That's really important. During spring break, my girls went 3 days with my in-laws, and we were so excited. I was more excited about the me time. The couple time was good too. But really building that in where it doesn't wait for spring break. It doesn't have to wait until the end of the year, but you're scheduling that on an ongoing basis. And before you know it, it's part of life, as opposed to saying, oh, I only do that on Fridays. No, I take care of myself every day. and I listen to my body. When we're talking about managing stress, you listen to some of the things that are happening, the changes over time. It's not just age. It could be extra stress, and how does that really manifest itself? Am I becoming more ill? Can I not get well? What is that really happening? What's happening? Am I thinking negative thoughts, what have you? And it's just so important that we really schedule me time, and whatever that means. Celebrate yourself every day, because if we don't do that, no one's going to do it for us. And I found that to happen over time. We think that, oh, if I don't do it, it won't get done. We think that if no one does it on the job, then it is going to falter. But guess what? The job can be gone tomorrow. Unfortunately, your family can as well. At the same time, you've got to take care of yourself, to be there for yourself, and then you're able to be successful for everyone else.
I think it's tough to know what you could do tomorrow. That would mean that I would have a pearl of wisdom for you, which I'm not sure I could add a whole lot more, because I think the key is to understanding yourself and what is missing that you're not getting, or that you are getting and that you like. And for me, that meant getting up very early in the morning and sitting with myself with a cup of coffee, of course. And having that time to say, where am I now? What am I doing? Where am I going? Some people do it at night. I find it has been invaluable in my life to do that, and to start off the day of saying, what do I want to try to do better with? And what do I want to try to do? What do I want to, in some days it's what do I not want to do? Do not stay at work till 8 o'clock tonight.
Right.
Do not do that. You're coming home you're leaving at 5, or 6. 5 would be wishful. But so setting those, having that time to say, what do I need? And building in the spring breaks, I think.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.